Howdy there, folks. This tutorial will focus on using the structure, the proportions, and the planar head to draw a complete holistic portrait. Now, having said that, please remember that this is a step-by-step tutorial, a drawing in progress. Look, learn, and apply it into your practice. This is an angular planar head drawing that shows a certain methodology. We start out this exercise as we have with the others, as a basic sphere and axis line construction. I use a laser pointer to show the basic areas that I'm focusing on, the larger planes and measuring points of the head. The blue lines show the angles I am using for the first pass. The orange lines are adjustments I will make in the jawline later in the video. After establishing the vertical axis, I countered that with the horizontal lines to block in the position and proportions of the features. It is important to get everything working in tandem, but also keep it light, loose, and changeable. Here are the horizontal axis lines through the eyes and under the chin. I have already seen proportional mistakes in the length of the face and have already made changes in the chin by moving the horizontal axis line up slightly. The darker area shows the side plane away from the light. The green plane turns more towards the front, but is still in a light shadow. Now we speed up and block in the neck and shoulders and get the whole drawing to work together. At this point, we get the three-dimensional forms and the angle sights to work in tandem, constantly holding up the pencil between my point of view and the portrait to check out my measurements. Check the various shorter angles and variety of line weights in the jawline and the cheek. Here is the lineup for the axis lines I translate from the model's face and the planar head to the drawing. Top of the brow, eye axis, bottom of the nose, mouth or crease between the lips. Using the angular light contrast in the cheekbone, I use a comparison between the overall distance across the face to the shorter side of the head. This way I see if the head is too narrow or too wide. Also, I use the box on the four outer points of the head to get the heads proportioned right. Back to the planes of the cheek to look at how light affects the line and anatomical information in the head. Making the universe of marks work together to complete the concept. Now we move into some of the smaller planar changes and measurements. Even a smaller distance between the cheek edge and the mouth can decide if the mouth is too wide or too narrow. Compare the size of the head and the vertical to horizontal forms. Remember, every light change is a line weight change, dark to light. Now we speed up the process and angle sight the top planes of the head and block in the ears lightly. Using the forehead measurements, I block in the planes of the hair. It is important to use the light instead of the texture of the hair. Focusing on the hair strands can make a drawing look flat and cliched. Don't overly pay attention to the model's hair color. Block it out in accordance to the light that is generally falling on the upper planes of the head. Like all other parts of the process, also angle sight and compare the abstract measurements of how the volume of the hair covers the head. Now the shape and dimensions of the head are correctly coming together. I check the angles of the cheek and chin to get the edges right, then move on to the features and measurements. Check the inside corner of the eyes to the outside corner of the nose, down to the plane changes of the mouth and chin. Then the middle of the eye to the outside corner of the mouth. These points generally line up. Then the outside corner of the nose to the outside corner of the eye. This angle varies, so check it to get the proportions right. Then straight across horizontally from the top and bottom of the ear into the front plane of the face and line it up to the features. At this point, I edit out some of the lines and angles and check the brow line. I also make sure I pay attention to how the depth of the eyes are placed into the skull socket. This will affect the light logic and level of line weight and shadow in the drawing. To get these smaller angles, I hold the pencil up in front of the model's face. Make note of the degrees and measurements and place those decisions into your drawing. As I get a better idea of the bigger, correct picture, I quickly move around the portrait, constantly questioning the whole image. Blocking in the front plane of the nose helps establish the three-dimensionality of the face. After getting the general forms of the nose right, I move into expanding the modeling by blocking out the nose tip and side cartilage. I also make sure the underside of the nose is drawn at the right angle. Angle sight the upper wing of the mouth from the center of the upper lip. Then check the proportions of the mouth and lightly angle sight them in. Don't outline them, it makes it look cartoonish. Remember, the lips and mouth are surrounded by important forms from the nose to the chin. At this point, I examine the planes and anatomy of the cheeks. These areas are important that they catch reflective light changes. Now that all the pieces are working in tandem, I use the planes and measurements to settle the eyes into place with the brow, nose, and cheeks. Using the planar head for comparison, I check the shape, form, and proportion of the brow, lids, and eyes. These work together to support the rest of the process. Here you can see how the features fit into the landmarks of the planar head and the model's face. Again, notice how I bounce around the head and portrait to check various proportions and line weight. Remember, this demonstrational drawing is angular and structural to focus on the larger concepts of the planes and measurements of the head. Even as the portrait structure is solidifying, I am still seeing the more delicate lines and reinforcing the differences between the front and side planes. Here's the comparisons between the drawing, the planar head, and our model Parker.